Thank you. So thank you all for being here. I'm going to replace the rotary bell with a heart because Robert and I were given this beautiful heart by the people in San Francisco to help us understand that it is our heart that we have to think with. It is our heart that has to feed our brain with our emotion and our spirituality. And I wanted to show you that heart because that's what keeps me going. It was my heart that brought me to Santa Barbara to go to the university and be there for my children to go to schools in Santa Barbara. And was it destiny? Or was it my dream for peace that brought me to La Casa de Maria, where I served on the board for 25 years, working for spirituality and well healing of the planet? And I remember saying to the board president, don't you think world leaders should have a place to go to heal? All they ever do is try to solve problems. What about giving them the opportunity to heal? And Robert Mueller came to that first invitational. And I saw this man who replied to our invitation to join us with the two words, I will attend with enthusiasm. And those words rang a bell to me. What does he mean? He will attend with enthusiasm. And when I met him, I understood. And that's what I was hoping we could do tonight. But I forget that Rotary and email and Zoom often don't work together. It's just too much. But you got the feeling of this man's voice, the way Robert Mueller spoke to the world. When I heard him that night and he spoke at the Libero Theater, I realized this was a man of peace, that at 3 years of age, he told his dad in war-torn Alsace-Lorraine, the French were shooting the Germans and they were cousins. And he said to his dad, I'm going to be a peacemaker. And his dad said, I pity you, young man. There's no such thing as a peacemaker and you'll die poor. And Robert said, I don't care. I'm going to be a peacemaker. It was such an interesting story to listen to his journey of going to school, his journey of being at the University of Strasbourg and entering a contest that said the United Nations Association of Strasbourg is having a contest. And the contest is whoever can write the best essay on how to govern our world will get an internship at the newly created United Nations. At that point, Robert said, this is meant for me. I want to work for peace. He wrote his essay and forgot about it. And remember, the wars are going on. Germany, French, his grandparents changed nationalities 5 times without even leaving their home. And so Robert said, this is what I would do if I were president of the world. I would create a human family where we took care of each other, took care of the environment, and the rest is history. You can read that. It's on our website, robertmueller.org, his essay. And the door. And his mother went to the door and he said to her, where is Robert Mueller? Well, she didn't know if he was coming to put him in the army or what. He said, well, I have news. And she said, what news? And Robert came down from his upstairs study hall where he always was whistling and doing his work and came down and said, what's going on in this house? And he said, well, you just won a contest. He said, what contest? Oh, the United Nations Association contest. Yes. And you get to go to the newly created United Nations. This was 1945 and Robert was born in 1923. So here he was, not speaking one word of English, and he was sent to the United Nations. His dream almost came true. His mother said, you can't go. You have to stay here in Alsace-Lorraine. His father said, you have to be a hat maker just like me. Well, so he said, nope, I'm going. I have to work for peace. And he created what I would call 17 of the 30 different agencies at the UN. This is the book written about Robert. It's called Prophet the Hat Maker's Son, how he decided not to be a hat maker and to move to the United Nations. And 1994, when there were 2,000 days to the year 2000, remember I said to the La Casa de la Maria board, let's have a place for world leaders to heal. And in comes this stout, strong, short, beautifully gray-haired, blue-eyed man. And I'm thinking, that must be Robert Mueller. But I don't know Robert Mueller. I didn't even know him from anybody else. But when I met him, the director of La Casa de Maria, Don George, said, find him some places to speak while he's here. So I called up the beautiful Nuclear Age Peace Foundation and I said, would you like to hear Robert Mueller? He's in town. You know, Robert Mueller, well, I said, I'm a PR lady. Of course, he's wonderful. So he started speaking around Santa Barbara. And the last place he spoke was the Lobero Theater. And I was in the audience that night and I heard his words. I don't know if I fell in love that night or if he was just so irresistible. He was just so full of passion for peace and his harmonica and the way he spoke, he was enthusiasm. Long story short, I wrote a poem and I'm going to read it to you. Decide to be married by Barbara Gone Mueller. Decide to be married to become one heart, one body, one mind, and one soul. To share your joy, to live life as an art, and to make every moment precious, whether together or apart. Remember, as a couple, you are now more than one. To create harmony and perfect love that will last through eternity, even after this life is done. Remember also, there is a power in this union of two to protect this planet and humanity too. As a couple, you can do it. It's in the deciding to be united in love, to express your joyful oneness to every person you meet and every action you take, and together a perfect marriage you'll make. And so we just fell in love at La Casa de Maria. And I didn't want to get married again. And his wife had passed away, and he was living in a tiny little cabin in Costa Rica. And I decided, if I don't take this opportunity, I won't be able to fulfill the dream my grandfather had for me when I was 3. And he told me I was going to be a peacemaker. I said, Grandpa, I'm only 3. How am I going to be a peacemaker? And he said, I immigrated from Hungary to avoid World War I. When the coffin maker was stacking up those coffins, I knew I had to leave. I was not going to be a help anybody fight a war. So here my grandfather says to me, you're going to be a peacemaker. And Robert's grandfather, he told his father, I'm going to be a peacemaker at 3. So there's a harmony that happens. I don't know how this all comes together. I always, like I said, is it our destiny? Is it God putting us in the right place at the right time? So this decision to be married wasn't easy for me because I didn't know if I wanted to be married again. But anyway, we were in Santa Barbara. This was the 3rd invitational. We hadn't gotten married yet. And my mother says, well, when are you going to get married? And I look at Robert and I say, Robert, she thinks we should get married. And you know what he says? Okay, let's get married. Well, this time I said, all right, let's pay attention here. And we were in New York. It was a Sunday night. My mother had called us. And I said, if we're supposed to get married, we're going to get married by Friday. It was going to be on the Hudson River in nature. And the reason I talk about nature is because in the book, Prophet the Hatmaker's Son, when he went to the United Nations and he came back and his mother said, you can't go back. He was torn. What do I do? So he went to nature. And I'm going to send everybody on this call tonight, if you put your name in the chat box and give me an address, I'm sending you this book. Why? Because it shows what it took for Robert to go into the United Nations. And it's a little different slant on the history that took place when he was a young man and the history of the United Nations. You're going to love it. So I wanted to just let you know that his decision was made in nature. And when he asked me to marry him, and we decided we were going to get married, we actually got married on the Hudson River that Friday, from Sunday to Friday. Everything worked. All our children were there. All 11 grandchildren were there. And we actually were there in nature. And then from that moment, living in New York, my next stop was Costa Rica. Imagine the place where Robert created the University for Peace with the president, Rodrigo Carazo. In the humblest little cabin you ever saw, this tiny little cabin. If you want to know what it looked like, go to robertmueller.org and go to Mount Rasur. and you will see this cabin. It's this size, and here's all of nature totally surrounding it. And we lived in this beautiful nature. And one of our traditions was every night at dinner, we would have all the animals that we were raising come up at the same time we were eating. The horses, the chickens, the cows, the roosters, Pablo, our pet turkey, all the animals would come up. And people would say, how come the cats aren't being chased by the dogs? How come the roosters aren't chasing the hens? I would say, because we're in harmony. We're in harmony. I feed them what they need, and they feed me with all their love. And so we would have this ritual, and people would come just to watch the zoo and everybody not having fights. And I would say, well, that's the way the world should work. We need this kind of harmony, especially around meals. Well, we created something in Costa Rica called the Bench of Dreams, because we realized so many people were coming to Costa Rica just to be tourists, but we wanted them to live their dream. And we would have this gigantic bench on our property. We have over 500 acres there that we have never developed, and we're keeping for future generations to have a Robert Mueller Peace Park, so that you and your grandchildren can go to Costa Rica and not have any houses, anything, just pure nature. And so we put this Bench of Dreams out there on our land and to the meal in the mountain. Again, you can see that on robertmueller.org, the Bench of Dreams. And we would have these elder hostels who were visiting us sit there, and we would have them pick up 2 stones from the ground and think of the dream that they had when they were young and they didn't fulfill it yet. And when you see that dream so firmly in your brain and in your mind, and you become the energy of that dream, you take 1 stone and you throw it to the earth, so the earth will remember, and you take the other stone and you keep it so you remember your dream. And I'll never forget being in the Delegates Lounge at the United Nations, and I'm skipping around. You know, there's a lot going on here, but I'm just going to skip around to things that might implant themselves in your brain and think, I can do that. Because I'm in the Delegates Lounge, and in comes the ambassador from Costa Rica. And she says to me, you know what I have in my purse? And I said, no, what do you have in your purse? And she says, she pulls out this rock, this little stone. She said, I sat on your bench of dreams, and I dreamt that we would have a culture of peace. Does that ring a bell, David Wick? A culture of peace? Ambassador Chadre, and all of these things happen. And so I said, thank you. And so that's what happened. We started keeping our benches of dreams rocks to show how many things were actually happening and keeping in line with all the dreams that we had. So I'm going to stop for a minute, because there's a couple people on this program tonight that I'd like you to hear from, because I could tell you what people said about Robert Mueller. Let me tell you what some of the Secretary Generals said. Robert Mueller was strong-willed, that's for sure. He was a skillful administrator, but he was certainly not afraid of confrontation. It was obvious that he had enormous energy. Robert was like a freight train. He was strong, but perhaps he was a little too hard after dealing with the frustrations of the UN for 21 years. But there was something about Robert Mueller that appealed to Secretary General U Thant. There didn't seem to be any selfish motives in him. Nothing drove him. He was not self-conscious. He wasn't holding back anything. Ralph Bunche and Brian Urquhart said, there are 2 things that Robert Mueller is. He is spiritual, and he's filled with love for humanity. Now, when you read this book, we're going to have conversations about it, so I'm going to be sure and send it to you. I said I was going to have Jerry and Des. Would you like to give us your impression of Robert Mueller? So unmute yourself, and we'd love to hear from you.
Can you hear me, Barbara?
Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'm very touched enormously by your story, and it's not one that I don't know. But I'd like to share with your friends and audiences the Robert Mueller that touched us. So we first met at one of those invitationals in Santa Barbara. It's a matter of life and death. And I guess he invited a variety of people who, because of the urgency he felt about the piece that he was trying to create. I'd like to say that in my opinion, humanity is evolving at this time. And Robert was the epitome of an evolved human being. And you were in harmony, Barbara, because you matched him. And so that's a wonderful thing. He came to an event we held in Vancouver, in which, what was it called, Desmond?
Global Citizenship 2000.
It was called Global Citizenship 2000. And it was perfect for Robert. We had invited school children and their teachers and their administrators and their parents to come in teams to listen to Robert and then to act. And so the Ode to Joy, which is so beautiful that you played at the beginning, was how he started. And every single child, every single parent was up there and giving him a standing O for that. They were so touched. The next day, he gave the speech that you heard pieces of in his instruction to the children. And if you remember, Barbara, he said he was Mother Earth. And he said, why are you doing this to me? And he just had this wonderful way of speaking to children and their parents and their teachers. It just got to them. And we were very interested, Desmond and I were very interested in outcome. And so this is a story you may not have heard before, but in any case, there were many extraordinary outcomes from this, but one of them would just fit in exactly what you were talking about. So Robert told them about the Bench of Dreams, and we made one in Costa Rica, and in fact, we have one in our home, in our garden, facing the sunrise. And in any case, it was an extraordinary story that he told about his Bench of Dreams that got to this particular group of grade 6 children. And they decided they were going to raise money to buy the school a Bench of Dreams so everybody could have one. In any case, they had a bottle drive, and hundreds and thousands of bottles were brought, and they raised enough money for their Bench of Dreams. And when it was all finished and crafted by a beautiful local craftsman, they invited us to their assembly. And so there's Des at the top of the assembly. Just imagine this, the biggest kids at the back. These children now in grade 7 were the biggest children. And then below them, the grade 5s, the grade 4s, the grade 3s. And at the very bottom here, the little kindergarten children sitting on the floor, 300 of them, listening to Desmond tell them the story about the Bench of Dreams and the story about the stones. And we had a whole bunch of buckets of stones passed around, and the children were given stones, and they were told that if they held a stone in one hand to keep, and in the other hand to put back in the bucket, that their dreams would come true. And so Des is telling this story, and the little kid at the bottom says to the kid beside him very loudly, "It must be true because it's Einstein speaking," referring to Desmond and his gray hair. In any case, these children understood the whole concept of following your dream. And I think that what you're trying to do now too, with your work in the Rotary and United Nations and helping us with the Visioneers and helping to create Robert's legacy and the virtual exposition, all that work is part of that whole issue of dreaming something to make it come true.
Thank you.
What I want to say to everyone in this meeting is there's absolutely nothing that can be created, whether it's an organization or a painting, a bench, a flower. Every single thing that humanity creates begins with a dream. It begins with a vision.
Thank you, Jerry. I really appreciate you saying this, because the dreams that have come true, you don't have to have anything special. Make your own Bench of Dreams. And I just did a talk for World Unity Week. And in that talk, I talked about dreams creating our future. our energy of our thoughts. And so many times Robert and I would be speaking in like Sardinia or in Japan, especially in Japan. When I was in Japan with Robert, he played his harmonica and did his speech, and everybody was so excited and they clapped. And then I stood up and I said, I love you with my global heart. I got a standing ovation for saying just those words. I love you with my global heart. And the other night I was telling Rudy this. I had a dream. And the dream was that I was supposed to love the world with a global heart. And all of this is coming back to me. So I'm in my office and I'm looking at this global heart. And they not only gave us this global heart, but they called us a cosmic couple. And I think, how powerful are we really? Robert never doubted that he was powerful. We used to teach seminars, Decide to Be Happy. Marilyn Tam said Robert was her mentor. She wrote the book on happiness. She went to Bhutan to meet with the king of Bhutan, whose global problems were always solved by happiness. His money was not about money, but it was about what is their general feeling of happiness. And so when you met Robert, you were propelled to do something. Barbara Marx Hubbard would say, don't let Robert tell you to do anything because you'll end up doing it, because Robert Mueller had that power. He believed you could do it. We were at the 50th anniversary at the United Nations in San Francisco, where David Wick is our president-elect, who's going to be running the meeting next week. And this lady comes up and she says, Robert Mueller, I did what you said. I sold my house and I moved to Africa. And I thought, oh, brother, here it comes. And I created a way for those who had had polio to get to school. I created a way for families who had blind people in their lives, and I could help. All of a sudden I'm thinking, oh my gosh, there are miracles that are happening right in front of me right here at this 50th anniversary. Now, many of you may realize that we now have just had the 75th anniversary of the United Nations, and we're in the 76th year of the United Nations. And that's why I'm so proud of our Rotary, because Rotary was there at the founding of the United Nations in San Francisco 76 years ago. And they helped create the charter for the UN. And there's just so many things that Robert touched and created. And as I look at the papers around me and I see all these things that we worked on together, his book, Most of All, They Taught Me Happiness, it's all about people who realized that happiness was their vehicle for the future. I look at Arthur. Arthur was a close friend of Robert. Robert and I sat on the same location where Gary Davis pitched his tent and would not go into any country that needed a passport, creating the world's citizen's passport. You know, your life can be such a journey, and you just look back and you think, holy cow, did I do all that? Like Dee on this call today said, you must be 300 years old, Barbara, because no way could you have done all of that. No, that's not true, Dee. I'm not 300, but I am 80. And in 80, you can do a hell of a lot in a long time life. And so, you know, people say, you don't even look 80. Of course not. I have peace in my heart. I'm working for what I love. And if you do what you love, Rudy, don't worry about it if you turn 71 on the 13th of this month or the 10th, whenever your birthday is, because you don't get older when you're working for peace and you're of service. Honest to God, just pay attention to what you're doing and say, does this make me happy? And if it doesn't, don't do it. Does it bring me joy? Is it serving the world? If it doesn't, don't do it. Pay attention. Be present. You never know. The other day I'm coming home. I'm just going to tell you some of the little things that you can do. I'm in the grocery store and the baby's crying. The mother's yelling at the baby. And so I go up and I say, what a beautiful child. You must be the luckiest woman in the world. She calms down, thanks her baby, gives her baby a hug, and there's peace. You are the peace producers of our planet today. You'd be surprised how often when you have peace in your heart, what you can do. And I know this because I have peacepodcast.org, where I have 75 different people being interviewed. And thanks to Rudy Westervelt and Karen, 2016, I was lucky enough to interview 75 of the speakers for the Rotary World Peace Conference. And I would ask them the question, what does peace mean to you? And the answer was, peace begins with me. It starts with the conversation. If I'm at peace, I can handle anything. If I'm at peace, I can even handle upset. So, with that, I just want to say thank you for letting me be your president for a year. I would love to tell you more, but I want to hear from you. I want to hear from you. Anybody who knew Robert. Peter, do you want to say a few words about Robert?
Sure. I was thrilled when he visited San Diego a couple of times. There was a health institute here that he spent several days at a time, and I found out that he was in town, and what an honor to spend an hour with him during those times. So I got to meet me who was calm and cool, and so it just that's the I'm at. I did the speaker of the room, and he just was he was the definition of what you're talking about, of a peaceful, of a powerful, committed man. And so that's what I loved about being your husband. And he did these ideas. I have the link to it. He was just prolific with ideas for peace, and I just was stunned when he was showing me these lists and lists and lists. And I thought it was 2,000. It turns out to be 4,000 different ideas for peace.
500 ideas and dreams for a better world, Peter. That's how we fell in love too. We had at that invitational, I said, okay, everyone, all you world leaders out there, you have wisdom. I want you each to give me one idea for the year 2000, and then I will bring together all of your ideas and I will put them in a book for the year 2000. And nobody said anything except Robert. He stood up and said, I'll do it. And Robert wrote 7,500 ideas. Now, I'm going to tell you a secret to his success. He figured out when he was the most productive. And that's one thing he tells all the audience is when are you the most productive? And that's when you should do your work. So every morning at 4:30, he would wake up and he'd start writing these ideas. And he would just keep writing them. And pretty soon he had 100 ideas. And then I give them to my secretary and she would type them up. Okay, here's an example. Everything which exists is part of an independent universe. All living creatures depend on each other for their existence, well-being, and development. Simple idea like that. We all depend on each other for our well-being and our development. Life on Earth is abundant and diverse. It is sustained by the unhindered functioning of the natural system, which ensure the provision of energy, air, water, and nutrients for all living creatures. Simple ideas, or ideas like this: decide to be happy, decide to be peaceful. Those were ideas that he just kind of bubbled up with. He would say, I'd go to bed at night and say, okay, I'm ready to write some ideas, and something would come to him. He would bring an idea from his wisdom gained at the United Nations. He said it was the best education he ever had. And we created these ideas. We traveled the world and talked to people. We would go to Japan and we would speak to the Japanese. We would go to India and speak about spirituality and science. And when Robert passed in 2010, they invited me to the United Nations to do a speech that he was supposed to do. And I spoke to the United Nations. And instead of giving Robert an award, I got an award as the spiritual voice for the United Nations. And I was so honored. You know, Robert was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize 23 times. Imagine being nominated 23 times. Last years of his life, he had a little dementia. And so it was my honor to take care of him. And Dee Boswell on our call tonight also has a wife with dementia. And I told him the secret. You want to know the secret? Smile. Regardless of what happens, just smile. They don't know any better. They think you're fabulous and they're going to be happy because you are happy. If I give you one bit of advice, stay happy, bring joy to those you love, and know that the life is worth living, but be of service above self. Rudy, with that, I'm going to say thank you for a fabulous year. Thank you for letting me talk about the love of my life. But guess what? It wasn't over. I met another peacemaker from Norway. I fell in love with Sig Watney. I said, Sig, don't fall in love with me. I don't have time to get married again. He still fell in love with me and I fell in love with him. And we spent 7 marvelous years. And guess what he was? A 30-year Rotarian. that wonderful man and I were at the 2016 Rotary E-Club. I shouldn't say E-Club because that wasn't founded until after, but the Rotary World Peace Conference. And my fondest memory is him sitting in the booth and Peter Meisen having his booth right down the way, and all of us being together at the Rotary World Peace Conference put on by our hero, Rudy, and his wife, Karen. And so with that, I say thank you all, and just keep looking for the ways that you can be of service. Just like Robert said, never give up. Remember that life is about living and loving.
Barbara, thank you. Thank you for your year of leadership here. And I know it'll continue into the future in your positive energy. So thank you very much. You've led a life for peace, and you've still got plenty more to give.
I hope.
Brian, you got any comments here? I see you got a hand up there.
Yeah, thank you. I met Robert in Costa Rica in 1989 for the World Peace and Sustainable Development Conference. The Dalai Lama was there. It was when he received the Nobel Peace Prize. And Robert gave a talk about the new cosmology. He talked about every aspect of education that needed to bring peace teachings into education. And I have never been as inspired from a speaker. He impacted my life here, and here in Ojai at Meditation Mount, there is a bench of dreams. Thank you, Barbara, for continuing this life legacy. And if I can do anything to help create that in Costa Rica, I'm interested.
Brian. And thank you all for your chats. You know, they are our lifeblood, these little chats that go on the side. And, you know, I remember Robert saying when he passed, you know, we put on his tombstone, a life spent working for peace. And then we had from his book on happiness, decide to be happy and live your miraculous life to the fullest. And those are the words that I keep in my heart. And when it was so hard in Costa Rica, because I was living in a cabin that wasn't the size of my computer, and it didn't even have an oven. It didn't even have a refrigerator. And I'm living there, and I had come from Santa Barbara, but I said, I must be meant to be here. And because the legend was, from this mountain, peace shall go to the entire world. And when I was ready to give up, I had a mango pie appear on my dining room table. And I was ready to go back to Santa Barbara. I had had enough of this. And the mango pie was sitting there hot and steamy, and there was nobody around. I sat down and I ate half that mango pie. I had so much energy and so much love in me with all that sugar pouring through my body. And I decided I was going to stay in Costa Rica. And I called up the founder of the Radio for Peace, where I had an inspiring conversation show going on. And I said, Deborah, did you make that hot mango pie? And you know what she said? I had been going to make that pie for 3 years, all the time you've lived here. And today I had this inspiration. I better make it today. I said, you do not know what I'm now calling your pie. It's called the miracle pie. Because from that moment on, I was making Monet gardens. I was creating things that I had never thought possible in this beautiful, pristine land. I was growing squash the size of a cow because all of a sudden my energy was back. And it was all because of the miracle pie. And I tell that story. Look for the miracles in your life. They will appear. Sala, you look so darling. Do you have something you want to say?
She's muted, so no.
Unmute her, Bruce. You can do that.
She can unmute herself.
Sala, unmute yourself. Sala is my pal in Washington.
I really only want to say thank you in any language that you know or don't know, like Madasi Pa in Ghana. You have been an inspiration, and I thank you.
Thank you all. You know, you can only be inspired by the faces I see each week on our little Zoom calls. Your little squares mean so much to me. I want to thank you for that.
Yeah, David.
I would like to comment. This is Dee Boswell again. I want to thank you for the special year that I've had with you and your club. I'd like to comment on Robert's dreams and that you put together with you. then they're pervasive throughout the world today, especially at the United Nations. Over his many, many years at the United Nations, he dreamed of peace, love, magnificence of nature, happiness, and evermore today, it's visible in the spirit of the United Nations in their 17 sustainable goals that also follow the 7 areas of focus of Rotary. Barbara, I thank you for your talk tonight.
Thank you, Dee. And Dee read Most of All They Taught Me Happiness, Prophet the Hatmaker's Son, and my book. Oh, I'm an author too. I wrote the book Revolutionary Conversations, the tools you need for the success you want. And you know why I wrote that? Because Robert had dementia and I had to do something to keep my brain going. And so during that period, I met with my team and we wrote this book, The Tools You Need for the Success You Want. Nancy, you had your hand up. This is Nancy Martin on my United Nations.
I don't know if you can see this,
I see
but
it.
Robert used to come to our class, Robert and Barbara, on UN Day, and we always had a UN celebration at Montessori. And we had lunch together for everyone, and we always invited someone to give a talk. And so Robert gave a talk a couple of times, and afterwards he would come and sit in the circle and listen, and the children could come up to him and ask questions, and he would listen and answer their questions. And I thought that was so charming. And we had a bench of dreams, but the bench of dreams was mainly a peace bench. And so we always told the kids, if they had a problem, go sit on the bench. And often I was surprised because somebody would be sitting on the bench and all of a sudden someone else would come and join them. And that was usually the person that they had the problem with.
And Robert never said no to a speech. He did thousands of speeches. He never said no. And he would go to the Montessori school. And remember when Nancy, I was sitting up on the stage and this little girl said, "Oh, Mrs. Mueller, you're so important. And I'm only 5, I can never do anything." And I turned around and behind her was this big word on the back bulletin board. It said peace. I said, "Do you want to be part of an international development?" She said, "Yes." I said, "Let's build peace corners." And now we have 35,000 peace corners around the world, all because she complained that she couldn't do anything. And they're all in all the Montessori schools. I've had people calling me up from the most remotest place saying, "I just saw a peace corner." And it's nothing more than a little plaque that says peace corner. And you put it someplace in your house. It's your neutral zone. It's where you belong when everything is going haywire. Sometimes you'll see a child sitting there because the parents are so upset with the kid. Or other times you'll see the mother sitting there and they know, you can't bother me. This is my peace corner. And with that, I wish you peace. And Marilyn King is a part of the Visioneers. She's part of our global movement. We have Avon. I mean, everybody here is connected. And I feel like I have an invisible.
David's got a comment here. He's following you, so.
All right. David.
Well, I just want to say that I met Robert Mueller a number of times in San Francisco, and it was, to begin with, was through Avon Madison, the president of Pathways to Peace, and who's worked with Robert at the UN. And then I met you and Robert when he came to make a speech. And one of the things that was very impressive, there's another with the children's festival of children in 1999. And I brought my son there, who was just a little guy. And Robert was so sweet, and he immediately played his harmonica. And it was just like his heart just touched his, it really made an impression, just fantastic. But I also just want to thank you, Barbara, for your spirit, for your energy, for your continuing overflowing of peace building and your love and care for all of us. And also just to let everyone know, Barbara's not disappearing. Barbara is part of our leadership team. As we move into this next year, we've got a fantastic team of people. And Barbara is a key part of that. So we just thank you and look forward to our continuing the peace building work from here on. So thank you so much.
I feel really good about moving on because I know you're going to be there carrying the torch for peace with Rudy and Karen and the whole leadership team. And what a team. Wait till year 5 is done. We're in our 5th year and you watch what goes on. My. It's unbelievable. And so, you know, we all leave our mark, don't we? Upon whose shoulders do we stand? Margaret Mead, she told us, you know, never underestimate what a small group of people can do. And we met Peter Meissen because Robert had prostate cancer. We took him to the Optimum Health Institute. He was so sick. My mother said, "You killed him." I said, "No, I didn't kill him. I healed him." And I said, "Just watch. I'm going to give him some chicken and watch what happens, because you can't have any protein when you go to the Optimum Health Institute. That's how you get rid of cancer." So I gave him a chicken leg and he started to smile and he played his harmonica. She said, "You didn't kill him." I said, "No, I cured him," because he was so used to putting his energy out in the world. But he had to bring that energy back so it could heal him. And you just have to know that. You be with the person you love so that person can heal. And if you ever get cancer, go to the Optimum Health Institute, drink wheatgrass juice up the yin yang, and you'll be better. Okay, that's my last word.
Arthur's got his hand up there. His arm is sore because he's been holding it up so long.
Okay,
Yes,
Arthur,
well,
Al.
yes, well, I just unmuted. Okay. Yes, well, it was just, first of all, you and Robert are incredible lights to the world. And I feel so honored and touched and moved to have met him. And what I remember most is just his incredible positive energy, even in the worst of difficulties, wars, challenges, oppression, nothing got him down. And I was so thrilled, and Gary was too, to know that his bold action of sitting on that line between France and Germany for all those months in the freezing cold, that helped inspire Robert onto his journey. And when Gary came to his house, you know, he said, either we listen to Robert and do what he said about coming together as one world, or that's it, folks. But even that, he said with that joy. And I think the thing that impressed me most about Robert was so many things, but the story of the power that positive energy gave him when he was in Strasbourg and the Nazis were coming to get him, and they broke into the house where he was. And instead of running and being afraid, they were tearing up the stairs to the attic. They're going to catch this guy hiding out. They're going to grab this Robert Mueller and drag him to the street. He just filled himself with joy, went right into their midst, greeted them with joy in his heart. And of course, they didn't think, well, he could be Robert Mueller. He just walked right by them out into the street. He filled himself with such love and light that even the Nazis couldn't kill him. So that is incredible power. And I'm so glad that you're carrying on Robert's amazing power. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you for bringing it to us for a year.
You're welcome. And that story is so wonderful because he was in the attic and they were there, Nazis were there to arrest him. And he said, "What can I do that the Nazis would never expect?" They would never expect him to walk right down and say, "What's going on in this house?" And they were shaking his secretary and they said, "If you don't tell us where he is, we're going to kill you too." And she just was petrified. But Robert said, "What's going on in this house?" And they said, "We're looking for Louis Patisson," which was his assumed name. He was in the French Resistance. And he said, "Oh, I saw him on the 4th floor." And all the Nazis went up to the 4th floor. Robert walked out the front door, got a bicycle, and in 1997, I married him. If he wouldn't have done that, I never would have had a husband that I could not believe, period. That's all I can say. Thank you, God, for letting him be free so that he could spread his wisdom to the world. And in my poem, I say, even after this life is done, our work continues. We have a vibration. That vibration goes out into the world. And I know that your vibration is strong. I look at each of you and I know you have a vibration and we will remember it. And it's on whose shoulders we stand. And now
We could give you a standing ovation, but if we did that, everybody would just see our navel. So we'll avoid that. We'll just do it sitting down. So Barbara, thank you for a great year. This is has been an exciting year, and our club got every award that the district handed out, and then some probably. And we've had significant growth in our club this year. We have just inducted the 85th member from 56 to 85. It's pretty good growth. And I know there's some goals here for next year so we can break the 100 mark. And I'm sure we will, because we have such a great group of peacemakers in our club. This is really exciting, where we come from and where we're going. So thank you, Barbara. And every year, our club is lifted a little bit farther and farther and farther. So we're looking forward to exciting year ahead, and you've laid a lot of groundwork for that. Thank you.
It's been my pleasure. I just cannot thank you enough for these little squares that smile all the time. Thank you so much. And Rudy, I want to thank you for recording these talks. I go back every once in a while and I listen to somebody who has spoken to our club, and I realize the power of the long words and the beautiful books. Catherine, you're way down in Australia. You want to say something? We haven't heard from you yet. No, not today. Okay. Well, with that,
Thank you very much, Barbara.
I should have Carol say something. Carol, you haven't said anything today. And you know, last week was Widow's Day. Did you know that? We're widows.
No, but I do believe that you bringing me into this group, which happened right before my husband or after he passed away, has saved my life. And this group has saved my life. And the things that are happening with peace, I could tell you some wonderful things that are going on. We'll talk about that later. And it's just been a miracle for me to be with this group for the last 9 months.
Thank you, Carol. And you know, a good friend of mine said, you have to meet this woman named Carol. I met her and she needs to be in your Rotary E-Club. And she's been a faithful member and a wonderful friend. So thank you all again. With that, I say good night, bless you, and please keep peace in your heart, because that's where it begins.
Beautiful. Thank you, Barbara. Yay.
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 Everyone.
Hooray for Barbara. Woo!
Thanks, Barbara. Bye.
I'm gonna cry. Woo-hoo-hoo.
Yay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Island Carl.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Okay, good night, everybody. Keep peace in
Good
your heart
night.
out there.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for
Thank
recording,
you.
Rudy.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
You're gonna get a book in the mail, everyone.
That,
Yay.
Barbara. Looking forward to it. Bye, Connie. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Bye.